Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I am Livonia Montute, and I'm the Program Manager for the Massachusetts Institute for College and Career Readiness. I'm joined today by my colleague, Emily Murphy, who is the Director of Programs at the Rennie Center for Education, Research, and Policy. We are excited to have her join us to do an in-depth discussion on teaming and collaboration, offering some information and some tips. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Emily for her presentation.
Thank you, Livonia. So I'm glad to be here today. As Livonia said, my name is Emily Murphy, and I'm the Director of Programs at the Rennie Center, where I manage a large initiative meant to further district capacity to implement reforms through teaming and labor management collaboration. You could say that the initiative, called the Mass Ed Partnership, is marriage counseling for school districts, both union and central office, whose relationships have become stressed for a variety of reasons. In today's presentation, I'm going to bring some of the key learnings from that work to you all in hopes of helping your teams effectively collaborate. Before we begin, I ask that you mute your computer speakers to eliminate feedback, mute the phone while you're not asking questions or contributing a comment. Really encourage you to participate. Anytime you see a question written in green, participants are welcome to jump in with responses. And just to let you know, there'll be or time for questions at the end of this session, so please, feel free to have more in-depth discussion then, and have paper and pen available to jot down any thoughts you have for that discussion section. So this slide in sum states that teaming and collaboration can lead to significant organizational and individual benefits. That is to say, when teams are constructed with the intention when they keep in mind some key factors, which we'll go over in a bit, real innovation and learning can emerge. One key takeaway from this definition is that the differences in perspectives can lead to better solutions. So we're really trying to get a team that really includes a lot of diverse participants, can really make it, that team more higher functioning and more innovative. Since the Rennie Center where I work at is an education think tank, our goal is to always ground ourselves in the research base. Here's a sampling of research that I pulled on teaming and collaboration, specifically in the education space. Most of my research and experience has been done on labor management partnerships, but the learning from that work is easily transferable to research district partnerships and beyond. You can see from these studies the theme of trust is very important, and its positive relationship to problem solving, innovation, and teaming. We will dedicate some time later in this presentation to discuss what is meant by these statements and how to build trust in teams. So from this slide, you can really see that there's a few different benefits from strong teams. So not only do the quality of decisions increase because you're including a lot of folks who are closest to the problem, but also the quality of solutions because there's more resources to bear. And the quality of implementation. So the hope is that the more you include different stakeholders and support them, it increases their investment in the work. And really that investment can mean a lot when you go into the implementation phase of your project. So now I'm going to go over the 5 components of effective teaming. So first, it's not only important to have purpose, but it's very significant that others feel that there is a purpose and that that purpose is a priority. Establishing a team and dedicating lots of time to deeply understanding the issue, designing a programming, researching your initiative, and then implementing your design takes time and energy, both resources which you do not want to expend if the issue or program chosen is not of importance to everyone. That's not to say that you need every single person's sign-off before starting an initiative. It's instead to say that effective teams understand the wider priorities of a district or organization and that they work hard to understand how other stakeholders feel about the issue. One recent example that I encountered was in Brockton Public Schools. The district, as well as select teachers, were interested in exploring how to maintain linguistic diversity while making sure their English language learners were advancing their language acquisition. After many conversations and much research, they decided to explore the possibility of establishing a 3-strand dual language immersion school. One piece of their process for deciding this focus was a community survey to assess interest. The group designed a survey and garnered responses from over 2,000 parents and guardians, 400 teachers and staff, and 180 others. Their team lead reported that an overwhelming 1,500 parents said they would enroll their children in a dual language program, while another 550 said they might. This provided a nice backbone to their future efforts and is a nice illustration of an ambitious solution which took into account the community and established assurance that this new program was wanted and was a priority by all. It's important to note that ambitious problems are often the key drivers to innovative solutions, and they often have a wider breadth of community support too. So component number 2, diversity. Diversity in team members encourages the team to see problems in unique ways, allowing for the generation and exploration of more alternatives, which ultimately leads to better decisions. Having diversity also helps to avoid the trap of groupthink, as people are forced to pay closer attention to colleagues' contributions. Including those people who will need to drive implementation during the planning process also increases the understanding of the group about what it will take to get the project implemented. It also encourages buy-in among different stakeholder groups. Now, this is a key point because implementation is key to take into account during the design phase of your project, because eventually those implementers will have to carry forth the work that will affect teaching and learning. On the side, when determining your team, you may want to consider how this plan is going to roll out and who's going to be responsible for moving it so you can include them from the start. Additionally, research has suggested that diverse groups in the long run display more problem-solving prowess and creativity. Now, that is the case, but only if they pay attention to group processes, which we'll get to in a second. So the third component, to establish agreement on roles and responsibilities. Understanding and agreeing on the team purpose and member roles are both important factors in highly effective teams. That way, expectations are aligned with reality, and deciding who will do what helps to push the work along. Diversity of skills and experience can be leveraged for task accomplishment because, as most of you have experienced, not everything needs to be a team effort. So, the fourth component of effective teaming is norms for behavior. There are 6 key areas that we recommend establishing ground rules or norms in: participation in attendance, meeting planning and record keeping, interpersonal behavior, communication with key stakeholders, and decision making. Additionally, most teams benefit from establishing a way to hold the team accountable to its norms. This can increase follow-through and negate conflict. Norms have also occasionally been used by groups to track their progress in working together. For instance, a team that we work with in Springfield created a post-meeting survey for assessing their adherence to norms as a way of understanding how well the team was collaborating. So component number 5. This component will be expanded upon in a few slides as it's very important. But safety and trust are essential to teaming. The reason for this is even good teams fail. Good teams learn from failure and innovate beyond. People need to feel safe failing and comfortable expressing themselves and taking risks with their team, lest your team constructs mediocre solutions and doesn't get the true feeling of all its members. You don't want to end up like this team in the picture, where ideas are pushed forward that may not be the best, but because nobody takes any risk and speaks up, they end up going forth with a mediocre plan. Since we don't have the option to cultivate our team since birth, nor do we want to, given the evidence on positive effects of having diversity in teams, we can rely on some of the structures previously mentioned, such as making decisions based on data and community input, creating work plans with tangible goals, objectives, action steps, and timelines, understanding what success looks like, establishing expectations for joint communication and team norms, and creating a meeting schedule and sticking to it. So all of this sounds good, but what about the team? What do we do to make sure everyone engaged and that work's progressing in the most innovative and effective way possible? The answer to that is understanding how teams learn and having a process for both learning together and for managing bumps in the road when they arise. So a few thoughts on learning and highly effective organizations who prioritize teaming are given here. In the dynamic environment, organizations have to learn to survive and thrive. Another person says organizations learn, adapt, improve, innovate when their teams are learning. So the question is how do teams learn? The reality is by taking risks. But the reality of taking risks is nobody wants to do it. So teaming is all about people being bold enough to ask questions, sharing data that shows there is a problem, suggesting alternatives, and challenging the way things are done. You can see from this, though, that because the characteristics of teaming, challenging the way things are done, problem solving, and whatnot, are hard because none of us want to look ignorant, none of us want to be negative or incompetent. So all of these perceptions that could come about because we're digging deeper and challenging folks can be really scary. But risks are necessary, and space also allows for people to feel like risk-taking is okay and that they'll not be penalized. So what I mean by that is there needs to be a team dynamic and kind of understanding, maybe through ground rules and whatnot, that we're expecting you to take risks, and those risks won't be penalized. So the point is it's hard to team in ways that lead to real movement in learning, to let down one's guard, to offer ideas, to ask for help, to look at what is not working frankly, and to learn from it without a sense of being targeted. So what we really need is psychological safety, and you can see the definition above. Psychological safety is a belief based on experience that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. So we should note, though, that psychological safety, as defined, is not just about being nice or never saying anything that will upset someone. To the contrary, it's about lived experience and about being open to the insights and challenges and uncertainties of others, and knowing that they are open to yours. It is treating what did not work well as the best possible source of lessons on what might work better in the future and the next time. It's doubling down on the idea that our work actually gets better when we understand it from multiple perspectives, and we're open to the ideas and insights of others in shaping and developing it. So a researcher out of Harvard University named Amy Edmondson put together this graphic, and you can see she's showcasing how teams can effectively get into the learning zone. On the y-axis, we have psychological safety, and on the x-axis, we have accountability. So the theory here is that we want to have high psychological safety and really feel accountable for our work too, because we know that if teams are pushed to produce something, then they're likely to produce something. So you can see here in the lower left-hand corner is the apathy zone. What this is when you're really not held accountable for anything, and there's not really any expectations. And at the same time, low psychological safety, where you feel like it's not really safe to think outside the box, you're really not going to be learning much. You're kind of going to be in the zone of just who cares. You can go up the accountability ladder to the high accountability but low psychological safety zone. This is the anxiety zone, so we don't want to be here. We feel like there's a lot, we're held accountable for a ton of things, but we can't really say our true opinions about them, where we really just become robots for implementing reform. Now, that doesn't feel nice to anybody and also doesn't lead to a lot of learning. You can see above the apathy zone is the comfort zone. So this zone is where you really don't have high expectations or a lot of accountability put on you, but you feel really safe to speak up. So you're kind of just voicing your opinions. You may or may not be, pushing the bucket, but you feel comfortable and you feel good. Where we really want you guys to be is the learning zone. So in the learning zone, as I said before, you're held accountable, and there's expectations put upon you as a team member, as an individual, and you feel really safe in kind of voicing your opinions and pushing that team to the next level. And in that zone, teams can really learn, progress, teams can really learn, progress, and innovate, and that's what we want for you. So it's important to note when people feel safe and share ideas that conflict will arise. And so even in that learning zone, you're going to probably encounter some differences of opinions. And we must understand that although conflict among collaborators can feel like failure, differences in perspective are a core reason to team in the first place. And resolving conflict effectively creates opportunities. So now we're going to discuss the 5 key skills for managing conflict. So on this slide you can see the 5, and these are outlined specifically by John Doria of Teachers 21, and their center or focus is really on feelings as data. So a weeping person, a person vibrating with anxiety, a person scowling or flexing their jaw muscles, they're all giving us critical data with which to work. When you share that you're tired or anticipating a call about healthcare, or that your child is sick or recovering from the flu, you give your team something they lacked before, and that's the knowledge and ability to plan and respond. Asking questions is the key to this, as it gives you more information. So for example, tell me more. It sounds like you've had this experience, or did I hear that correctly? You're angry because I missed the first half of the meeting, but I'm still talking a lot? So it's not about fixing blame, but it's about looking for the contributing factors in a situation that's not ideal. And when you ask as many questions as you make statements, when you put learning more about the things you care about ahead of championing your current point of view, and when you keep listening to different viewpoints of your colleagues and do not just rehearse your rebuttal, you're balancing advocacy with inquiry and pushing beyond the conflict zone into the learning zone. It's important to note that when disagreement occurs, it is the lack of questions that infringes on learning and moving forward. So this is just a nice quote that kind of sums that up, which is, seek first to understand and then to be understood. So that's all well and good, but if conflict does arise, you should have a process for managing conflict and making decisions. So here's a nice graphic that kind of showcases the process I'm going to describe. So the first part of what we call the interest-based process is to speak up and raise issues. It's important that the issue be a problem and not its solution. Solution generation can come later, but first we have to understand what we are solving for. If there are multiple issues, that's okay too. We can hash them out separately. So in the next phase, we explore strategies for uncovering the root cause. So how are different stakeholders understanding the issue can be important. If there's data, what does it say? During this stage, it's important for people to listen. The more input we have, the broader the brainstorm of options to resolve the issue will be, and the better its solution. So this is really where we're gathering that data and listening intently. The third stage is to experiment. What options would resolve this issue, in part or in full? Brainstorm all options that would target the issue. And effective brainstorming really acts as a pool expansion rather than limiting the pool. Next, you'll need to assess the options. 3 criteria for assessing options are A, is the solution feasible? B, is it acceptable to all parties? And C, is it reasonable? So it's really important that you kind of take these 3 characteristics or criteria into account because you don't want to walk away with a solution that really can't lead to anything because it's not feasible or reasonable, or really people aren't really forming consensus around it. The parties really don't accept the conclusion. The 5th stage is agreement. So now consensus doesn't mean that everyone would have picked this option or that they would have decided on their own that this was the way they wanted to go. But consensus means that all members agree upon a single alternative, and then each group member can honestly say, I believe that you understand my point of view, and I understand yours. Whether or not it was my first choice for, I'll support it because 1, it was reached fairly and openly, and 2, it's the best solution for us at this time. So that's a really important piece. You've reflected, you've evaluated the feasibility, and if it's an acceptable option to all parties, and then the integration step, which can really scare people when you say consensus. But this is really about figuring out if the process for deciding upon this solution was fair, and it's the best for us at this time. So I can't stress at this time enough because, different solutions can be explored later, but a decision needs to be made and project or plan pushed forward. So although the interest-based process can be effective at managing conflict, ground rules should also be in place, which we already mentioned before, because these will help to establish a framework for operating that can negate many conflicts from even occurring. So the hope is that those ground rules set a precedent for the way you're going to communicate in a team or kind of decision-making processes, so that when things might come up where somebody misses a meeting and wasn't in a decision, the ground rules speak to how you are going to act, so it doesn't bubble up and become a conflict that you need to have a larger conversation about. So where does this leave us? Here are 5 next steps that teams can use to push their work forward and deepen their effectiveness. So the first one is develop a meeting schedule and ground rules to solidify the team processes. Remember, conflict is inevitable, and learning to manage conflict is key to effective teaming and collaboration. Experience working collaboratively to accomplish a concrete project is crucial to developing collaborative relationships that can withstand future conflicts and challenges. So the second aspect that I encourage you to think about as you're trying to push forward your projects. Conduct a root cause analysis or a logic model for the problem. So this part it's important to think critically about your problem and define that and potential solutions. Teams benefit from clearly defining a problem they're trying to address, clarifying its relevancy to the community, and understanding what success looks like. Adaptable tools and exercises can aid teams through this process, including systems assessments, root cause analyses, strategic objectives exercises, and the MICCR work plan template. So number 3, complete a project management system and continue to adjust when changes occur. So this is really to say keep implementation in mind from day one. So the role of the planning team is often to be an incubator and promoter of new initiatives, but ultimately the implementation will need to be transferred outside of the team. The team should anticipate long-term support structures, communicate the plan together, and work to build the capacity of implementers to sustain the work. So this is really key, and I think the project management system speaks to this because it does make you strategize for the long term and consider your implementation in the design of your project, and also to consider your evaluation plan, what you're going to do on the back end or what success looks like. So that can be a key component of your project strategy and your push to get things done. So number 4, collect data to maintain focus and drive action plans that center on student needs. So that is to say, determine a strategy for consistent reflection on data. So there really should be a lot of feedback loops where you're receiving information about how the design rolled out and about how implementation is going so you can make corrective action if need be in the midterm. Number 5, determine an external communication strategy and include community members into the planning and implementation process when appropriate. So developing a communication plan for routinely relaying the substance of the team's work throughout the district so that the work can be widely known and understood is key. Through effective communication, everyone's kept informed and there's no need to renegotiate the details each time the plan is discussed by the wider constituency. So that kind of wraps up what we were kind of going to discuss today on our webinar. I leave you with this one quote, and then we'll open it up to question and answer session. So plans are essential, but the process of planning where the ideas are hashed out is critical.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily, for the presentation and for joining us. We actually are going to encourage you to post your questions in the comments below this video. So feel free to leave us a comment or a question, and we'll reach out to you with more information. But thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching. Thank you, Emily.